Hello everybody and welcome to the November session of Smart Living Ballarat. I am your host Ellen Burns, and before we start I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Smart Living Ballarat is a free monthly workshop put on in collaboration between BREAZE and the City of Ballarat. And this is our last session for the year. There's no session in December because the fourth Wednesday, I think, is Christmas Day or Boxing Day. So we're actually not back now until February. We are coming back next year. It will be the 10th year of Smart Living Ballarat, so we'll be celebrating a decade of SLB, which is very exciting. And next year, all of our topics will centre around different aspects of zero waste. So stay tuned for next year's program. Follow us on Facebook if you don't already, Smart Living Ballarat, and please join our Facebook group as well, Smart Living Ballarat Facebook group, and that's where we discuss the topics every month. Every week we have a couple of check-in posts that we do, Waste Warrior Wednesday, Food Waste Friday, and a Sunday check-in as well. So please join us on the group there. Today we're looking at water saving, and we have a special guest speaker this month, Grace Darke. If you come to our sessions, you might know Grace already. She's a regular volunteer for Smart Living Ballarat and took a couple of the sessions when I was on maternity leave. And also our dishwasher powder DIY session last November as well. So without further ado, thank you, Grace.
Thank you. Right. Hello everybody. So I am here to talk about living smart with water, which is ironic on today where we probably just had a week's worth of rain downpour very hard and fast this morning on us all. So it's hard to think about, not having water or drought when it's actually raining. So I thought I'll just start. This is me running a water saving campaign. This is running a water saving project in the UK. So this is actually a real passion subject of mine. I was a project manager for an environment charity, and one of our projects was water saving. So we used to deliver workshops across colleges and schools and to the public and through social media, and we used to hand out free water saving kits and that sort of thing. So big passion subject of mine. And my degree that I did, we learned about animal science and conservation science, and so water became something quite strong in me, and my love of wildlife. It says save water and you save wildlife. So there's a big thrust and need for saving water beyond just our own needs as well. So why is water important, and why do we actually need to be probably more aware? Because it seems like this big blue planet of ours is just covered in water, so why would we need to worry about it? It's probably the very first sort of myth that people assume, that there's just so much water everywhere, that why would we ever need to worry about it? And breaking it down, so 70% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, but not all of that water is actually available to drink. So a lot of that water is actually salty. So 97% of the Earth's water is salty, and as we know, if we drink that stuff, we get very, very sick. And to remove the salt is actually a process that can be done, but takes enormous amounts of energy. So the knock-on effect of that is that we're creating even more damage in the process. So it's not it's certainly being used across the world in some places, but it's not the sort of go-to solution for any country really. So 3% of that 70% is fresh water. 2% of it is actually locked up in snow and ice. Which means that, again, it's not actually obtainable for drinking water. So 1% of it is actually found in rivers and wetlands, lakes and groundwater. But remember, that water does actually need to stay there as well, because that water is keeping enormous enormous amounts of ecosystems alive, and without those there are huge knock-on effects. So it actually works out that there is 0.3% of the fresh water that is actually available to us as drinking water, which is about 0.007% of all water on Earth is available for drinking water. So it really is, there really isn't that much available, and we are now spreading it so thinly across the globe. The reason water is so important for the living creatures and everything on this earth is because an awful lot of those living things depend on water for survival. So cells, which is what we're all made up of, absolutely need that water. Without it, they would denature and die. And the human body is made up of 70 to 75% water. And it takes about 10% water loss, so 10% dehydration, to be severely dehydrated. You know it yourself when you're just a very mildly dehydrated. You know, you start to feel thirsty, and things start to get worse and worse from there. But severe dehydration, which can result in death, is only 10% loss of water. So I cannot stress enough, we need water. So we've got to be thinking very sensibly about how we use that water on Earth. And it's worth really remembering, if you know, without going too deep into the science, we've probably all learned the water cycle from school. And it's quite remarkable, really, the journey that this very small amount of water actually goes on. But all water, you know, we have bodies of water. It can start anywhere, this cycle. So if I just start with, you know, bodies of water, that'll be land, you know, the sea, lakes, reservoirs, etc. First of all, you've got heat that causes evaporation. So these different states of water, so when it's obviously in a body of water, it's in a liquid state. And when it warms up, it becomes a gas, and so that evaporation goes up into the air, and we see clouds. And so when it stays up there for a while, it actually will cool and finally or eventually fall down as precipitate, a liquid again. So that could either be as rain, or as sleet or snow or hail. And then obviously it falls down onto the ground, and that is very, very important for obviously plant life and entire ecosystems and the entire living ecosystems, because everything is connected in food chains, etc. So that water that falls down is collected up by the roots of plants and trees, and it also falls through the ground as groundwater as well. And eventually all that water through the groundwater goes back out into our lakes and fills them back up again. So that is the very basic water cycle. And you have to kind of understand that to understand the principles of, you know, how we're using water, how we're pulling water and extracting it for our own uses, and how we see some of the weather patterns that we see that affect water availability. So water is, as I've just demonstrated, a very, very precious resource, and it's also finite. So infinite is, you know, there is unlimited, you know, amounts, and it's just readily available. But this is actually finite, and we know, because we've seen it, that in some places around the world and in some periods of time, we've run out. We have actually had very, very severe droughts actually occur, and we know the impacts of that are devastating, because that devastates animals, and it devastates communities and food chains, and it's not a good thing. Some of those things have historically been, you know, throughout the Earth's history of the Earth. Obviously these things are unavoidable when they happen, and we know climate change is a very natural phenomenon. However, these things are happening at a much faster and more unpredictable rate because of climate change, because of how hot and how warm we're heating up the Earth. So we've got also a great number more human beings on this planet as well. So as our population grows, we're also demanding more water for each of us. It's not just what we're drinking, because water is essential to our survival, but there are things that are outside of that we sort of almost go, well, there's essential, and then there's obviously lots of water that we're using for lots of other things, and we can talk about those things as well. But long-term access to secure water supplies is one of the biggest environmental and economic challenges we in the world face today. And while we are very, very lucky to live in this country, which is a very developed country, there are plenty of places around the world that do not have access to clean water, and those are things that we have to address. So our winters are actually becoming drier because of climate change. So whilst we see, we know rain is occurring like on a day like today, where we're sort of pretty close to summer, what we've actually found and what we're finding across the world is that our winters are becoming drier. So we're actually having less rain when we really should have it, which is in the winter periods when the ground is more permeable and you can actually collect more water for the rest of the year. And we know our summers are becoming hotter, and that's obviously impactful as well because you get more evaporation. So even though we're collecting all this water in lakes and things, and natural lakes, but also in reservoirs where we collect water for our use, we are actually seeing a huge amount of evaporation that's occurring from these bodies of water because of the heat. So tomorrow's forecast is fewer raindrops and even more people. So these are things that we really have to be looking at and planning for now. So even though it feels like everything's okay right now, we really do need to be thinking about planning for the future. Our water use over time has also dramatically increased. So even though our population has increased by about threefold, our domestic use of water, our use of water at home is actually increasing at double that. So this is because over time, we had the introduction of these wonderful things like hot water and flushing toilets and showers and washing machines and our gardens that we like to water and that sort of thing. So over time, as our living standards have improved, thankfully, we've also obviously seen a huge rise in the amount of water. And if we look just at a basic graph, actually this graph isn't necessarily Ballarat, but it really just goes to show in the early 1800s, we were talking about 20 litres of water per day. Okay, that's really not that much actually. In the 1960s, that went up to about 80 litres a day, and 2021 up there, this isn't Ballarat at all because Ballarat's a bit higher than that. But yeah, all the way up there to about 140, about 150, which is about sort of average in some places. So, but clearly you can see a trend is occurring worldwide. This is so our water use has increased significantly over time, and our homes contribute a significant proportion of the water that we're demanding from the earth. So I'm really sorry to pull on this one because I feel bad but I consider myself an Australian now. Australians are the largest consumers of water per person on the planet. That's crazy. So in some dry parts of the country, so obviously we're not talking about Ballarat here, but people per person are using about 400 litres of water per day. So that's about 4 bathtubs of water per day. And in dry parts, you can imagine that those are needed for things like agriculture and crops and growing food and watering gardens and that sort of thing, where they just aren't seeing rainfall for weeks at a time. But yeah, it's significant, it's considerable. So we are all responsible, and we all should play our part in trying to reduce this demand. Look at that, there's like a protection Canva thing. I should have looked at that picture before I put it up there. It's like, this is Canva, sorry. It's all about marketing. So developed countries are way worse than developing countries. That's really something that, as a world, we need to address and really quite, level out that. We know that. Have a look at COP30 that's just happened. We know that we're seeing the impacts of drought and the impacts of climate change hitting the poorest countries harder. So we're kind of living our lives in some ways completely complacent and not really getting to experience or understand just the knock-on effect of all these things, because we turn the tap on and water is just there, and that's probably going to be the case for many of us our lifetime. You know, we're always going to have access to fresh water, being that we live in a rich, developed country. But that isn't the case for many, many places in the world. And actually, I say that it's not even the case for lots of communities in Australia. There are actually small remote communities, First Nations as well, places where, you know, bodies of water that have always been there are completely dried up now because it's being extracted. And so this unequal and unfair distribution of water is something that we really should try to be aware of. Water is essential for the production of nearly everything. So even if we are doing everything our absolute best indoors to save water, remember that it's more than that. So clothing, for example, cotton is one of the highest yielding. It needs so much water, more than many other crops, that it's probably the most water demanding crop that we grow on Earth. And yet how many more clothes do we need on this planet? So, you know, if we're buying lots of new clothes, if we're buying lots of new goods, all those things, mining, etc., lots and lots of, and even, you know, technology. The data storage centres require so much water. Our demand of water is growing in more than we have. It's becoming quite a worry. So saving water goes beyond what we can just do in our homes. This is something we need to look, you know, wider than if we can. And we need to think about the fairness and equality, as I've said before. Plus we need to think about wildlife, please. Because water on this planet is not just for humans. It is for every living creature on this earth. And when we lose these creatures, there's a knock-on effect. Because they are part of biodiversity, includes humans. We depend on these ecosystems. We depend on every living creature plays a role, and there is a knock-on effect. And I'll explain something amazing. If anyone ever gets a chance or has ever heard about Yellowstone National Park, did you learn about Yellowstone National Park when you did your degree? Because it was something that fascinated me, but I love wolves. They're actually probably my favourite animal. I know you're not allowed to have favourites, but I do. Wolves. In Yellowstone National Park, which is in America, they removed wolves. It was something we've done this a great deal. Human beings like to remove apex predators. We like to remove the big scary creatures that could even come close to harming us or be greater or more strong than humans. So we've done lots of removal of species over time, and we managed to remove wolves from Yellowstone National Park. And what happened, the impacts of removing wolves actually damaged rivers. And that's really incredible to know that one species, an apex predator, did that. But because of its role in the food chain, it actually eats gazelle, you know, the sort of deer and that sort of middle level on the food chain. And those animals' numbers were increasing because they weren't being capped. But more than that, their behaviour changed because of the way that wolves hunted them. And what we started to see was degradation and soil erosion around rivers, and we started to lose the structure and integrity of rivers, and they stopped flowing normally, and we ended up seeing parts of the rivers drying out. And as soon as wolves were reintroduced back into Yellowstone National Park, the rivers returned. And that's how integral every species is on this planet. It's just one example of that. So, now Australia has its own issues that you know, we know is the driest inhabited continent in the world with the most variable rainfall, and we know each year can be very, very, very variable. So El Nino years often see lower than average rainfall, and La Nina years often see higher than average rainfall. And we do see these really changeable weather patterns years, you know, and every area in Australia as well struggles with its own sort of extremes because there is such a huge range of climates. So you've got you know, a temperate climate, which is where Ballarat is, ranging all the way up to equatorial, so incredibly sort of dry and see very, very minimal rain. And the thing that we also have to remember, again, a bit like that food chain of biodiversity, is that just because it's okay in one place, it's that knock-on effect. And we also have to think about water being shared and also extracted. So just because it's raining in one place doesn't mean we should still think everything's okay. The other thing with drought, and we know that in parts of South Australia they've experienced an absolutely devastating drought this year, but it's felt hardest by the most vulnerable communities, so often regional and remote communities really do feel it the worst. But for a lot of sort of urban or city, you're always going to probably be able to turn your tap on and it's there. You know, it's very rare that you end up with a bit of a low flow, maybe occasionally, but your access to it is not really, you're not really going to see that impact as much, or apart from things like they might introduce temporary bans, so hosepipe bans and things like that. Setbacks, but we start to see the setbacks impacts on agriculture because we already do in the supermarket. You know, sometimes you can't get certain fruits and vegetables because we've either had droughts or the other extreme is flooding. So these things are already starting to impact everyone. So everywhere is impacted by these things. Just going sort of, so just to kind of feed into where we're getting our water from. So lakes and ponds, here in Ballarat, you know, we have lakes and ponds and we have reservoirs as well. And what we're doing is collecting water when it rains. And that's obviously always going to happen if you've got a great big body of water and it rains. But you also get water feeding into those systems through groundwater. And interestingly, I think I might have mentioned it before, but groundwater is when the water goes through the topsoil and it travels through rocks and cavities and things, and it goes through and then it makes its way into lakes and reservoirs. But usually that's only happening in the wetter periods of the year. So we can only get access to that groundwater in winter, sort of early spring and sort of late autumn, really. So outside of that, you don't often get that water. When it's raining, rain isn't actually penetrating the earth when it's hotter because the ground is drier and it can't get through. And you often see more flooding as well in the drier periods of the month for that reason. So we are getting water that comes out of our tap is actually coming from natural wetlands, but it's also coming from the water aquifers, so the groundwater. And areas that are thoroughly saturated around the surface water is called a water table. So often when you get areas where water has reached the maximum that the groundwater can accept, you will see flooding occur. And that's quite impactful when you see silly things like building on floodplains, because you will often see homes that get very, very badly impacted by flooding. Because obviously when you get very, very heavy downpours, which we are seeing as a result of very unpredictable weather, you are, as a result of that, going to see a lot more flooding. So Ballarat is located inland, which means that sometimes you're not going to have as much access to rain. It's not going to rain as much, and it's at a relatively high point. And it covers the upper reaches of 4 catchment basins. So we actually are getting water coming from different areas. The majority of the city is located in the Barwon Basin, and that's where the initial supply was established in 1856. Within 10 years of that, it already reached capacity, so we actually had to join other basins because we weren't meeting our demand. We've had various droughts over the years that have impacted. One that some may remember, I wasn't here. You may
wasn't born.
It was the 1982 drought, which introduced the very tight water restrictions at the time, and this really helped actually to kind of instill this behaviour that we still see in a lot of Victorians, and had really great campaigns to introduce like the Don't Be a Wally with Water. It's a brilliant advert if you've never seen it before, it's quite funny. But you know, these were really great ways to get the message into people that water is not infinite and that we need to look after it. So we are expected to see a lot more water stress in Ballarat. There was an awful time in the millennium drought that also impacted Ballarat, but we are expected to see more of that happening in the future, as well because of population growth as well. The temperate climate zone, we see average temperatures are predicted to increase, rainfall is expected to decrease. I sound like a weather person, but they have one of these things as well, don't they? And today's going to be very rainy. So it is currently necessary to source water from more remote basins to maintain supply, and this requirement is forecast to increase. So what this is telling us is that if we were just relying on our need, we have to reach out further to get water to meet the demand of Ballarat. In the millennium drought, local water suppliers were not able to provide adequate water for Ballarat. I've heard various accounts of Lake Wendouree being drained or it just dried out. There was really huge impact. A lot of people remember this time. As a result, when things are pretty bad, we have to pull in water through that super pipe. So that's the Goldfields super pipe, and which forms part of the integrated water network. And this is now relied upon to meet the forecasted water demand for the next 25 years. So until about 2050, and at that point, it's probably likely that even more effort or more infrastructure might need to be introduced. You can go onto the Central Highlands website and actually have a look and see what current water supply is like. At the moment, it's about 53%. We've got about 53% of reserves, which is down on last year. So you can actually look at this stuff ahead and gives you some idea of, you know, for preparing. But yes, there's lots and lots of reasons, as well as everything I've just spoken to you about. But you know, the impacts of our water use have huge impacts for our greater community. So anytime we're using hot water, for instance, we are also using energy. So if that energy be it gas or coal or even just electricity, you know, if we're powering it that way, there is an energy use, which we know can have a knock-on effect for greenhouse gases as well. As well as that, a lot of the water that supplies Ballarat is also coming from stormwater. We have huge water cleaning facilities. A lot of the stormwater and water that we're collecting from sewage gets reused, it gets recleaned, it goes through a very, very technical process of cleaning to get back through to our taps again. And that in itself uses enormous amounts of energy. So every time, if we don't have to use that water, you know, flushing your loo, every time you flush your loo, that's going through that process. So, you know, if it's yellow, let it mellow. We know that water use has a huge impact on our, not just immediate community, but our wider community and the global community as well. Local rivers and wetlands, the water that we are using, every time we turn that tap on, we're pulling it out from our environment. And that means we are taking away water from our local wetlands. And the biggest thing here, no, it's not the biggest, but it's something right now affecting everyone, is money. There is a cost attached to water. We may consider it to be quite inexpensive, but obviously not when you attach it to energy, so showering, bathing, etc. uses hot water. There's a significant amount of money to be saved by actually by saving water. So this is if you have a look on the Ballarat and the Central Highlands website, you can actually watch the process of how they clean water. It's quite interesting actually, if you'd like to. Also gives you a breakdown of how much water we're currently using and versus what we should be aiming for. And I'll talk to you a little bit about monitoring your own use. And you can do that looking at your bill. You can see what how much you've been using over that quarter. But when they start to introduce smart meters, which I know some people may feel sceptical about, but these are really great ways for you to see, almost close to real time, what is happening, what you're using. And you can even see things like, I'm not at home, but there's water being used. So what's going on there? So you can actually pick up on things like leaks, which can save a lot of money. So in terms of litres, we should be aiming for about 155 litres per person per day. That's still quite high. That's actually still quite high amount of water. But at the moment, existing homes in Ballarat are using about 184 litres. Newer homes are actually pretty good in that there is a lot of regulations about water efficient appliances and that sort of thing. So those are actually using slightly lower water. And often they have smaller gardens, which means they're watering them less. So water use in our home can be broken down, if you have a look at that chart there, but approximately 70% of the water that is supplied to this region is actually to our households. So we occupy the largest percentage of water use. So yes, we have the agricultural industry, yes, we have industry, yes, we have business, but households still are the highest user of water. So we have a massive role to play. So if you have a look at that, what I'm seeing is that highest use is actually in our bathroom. So that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with looking at the bathroom where we can save water and money. Next, after that, is outdoors, so our gardens, then laundry, then our toilet and kitchen. I'm actually going to group bathroom and toilet together. And if you add them together, you see how massive actually our bathroom use is. So just a thing about water meters, because I did have a look, I wondered why we don't have smart meters here. Where I moved from in the UK, we had smart meters. So we went through this process probably about 5 years ago with the introduction of them. And I thought it was amazing because you have an app on your phone, it's linked to your smart meter, and you can see it actually happening. You can see, someone's in the shower at the moment. I don't mean you can see them in the shower. That would be very weird. I mean you can tell and see how much water is being used in litres. And it really allows you to see, be very conscious of what your household is using. And it really helps. We know this because it's been used and many places now use smart meters, but it is creating a change in behaviour and it is helping to reduce and manage our demand. So they are proven to work. They are very, very good things. They are introducing them through the Ballarat region as of now. So you may actually have already, or it may be happening quite soon, that you'll be getting a smart meter. Please don't be scared about it. They are a really good thing to have, and we really all need to be aware of what we're using. And as I said before, leaks can be detected, and I am proof of that because it happened to us. I was watching, our water use, and I would regularly be checking, and I used to actually have a little competition with myself, how if I could get it down each day. I kind of got quite competitive with myself, and at one point we were using more, and I couldn't understand why, and we weren't even home and there was water use, and we actually identified a leak in our toilet, and it was really significant, and it would have been costing us about £400, which is probably about $800 a year. So it was really, it was really worth us, and we actually fixed it ourselves because we watched a YouTube video. So it's pretty amazing. So they are definitely something we should embrace. Now, in terms of water efficiency and labelling, and if you are, if your dishwasher or your washing machine or your toilet or anything like that does conk out and you're about to buy a new one, just invest that little bit more to buy a really efficient one, and it'll save you money within a very short period of time, because the savings, choosing a water efficient product saves you up to $175 per household each year. And I mean, this is probably variable, but it could even be more than that. So definitely look out for those, 5-star ratings and above for your appliances. Now that is my toilet leaking. You can either see the leak, because that's in between a flush, and that's a fast leak, that's a visible leak. But leaks can be invisible as well, so they can actually be going on in the back of the cistern, or they could be going on somewhere else. So the average household spends approximately $1,386 a year on a metered bill, but it's likely to be significantly higher if you have a leak. Leaks can be very, very costly, and I don't know how many times you've ever walked into someone's house or a public building and there is a dripping tap or a leaky loo, but it is my pet hate. I see red. It really, I want to fix it. No, it's a waste of water and it's costing you money. Just pay a plumber to fix it, or fix it yourself, because there are so many videos on how to do them. So fixing leaks, you can just replace the worn washers, that is literally our washer from our toilet that was damaged and worn, and we just had to replace it. And also, yeah, just checking. You can actually check for leaks in your toilet by using little dials and things like that. So there's special ways that you can check for these drips as well. A tap leaking at the rate of 1 drip a second wastes more than 12,000 litres of water a year, which is huge. So that just breaks down a very slow to a very visible leak. So $11, which is probably nothing, we could probably all just manage that, although you can buy a lot with $11. Well, not much actually, but still, I wouldn't mind not spending it on wasted water, up to $241 a year. So other things, other water-saving efficiencies with your toilet is using a half flush. If you have a newer modern toilet, they have 2 flushes. Use the single flush, as we know, for the yellow ones. But if you have a really old-fashioned system, there are other ways that you can kind of work around with that. So there are water displacement devices. You can pick those up in different shops. Bunnings, I'm sure, have them. Other makeshift ways is just using a plastic water bottle filled up that just occupies the space in there, so it's using less water. Don't use a brick. We now know that causes too much potential damage in the system because they start to break away. But replacing your toilet, with a single flush to a efficient dual flush model, it saves more than 60,000 litres of water per year. It's huge. The amount of water we use to flush our loos is actually criminal when you consider, sort of the injustice of the world and how little water some places.
And that it's clean drinking water.
And it's clean drinking water. Yes, that's another thing. I go, what? Now, Ellen can tell you all about this. But if you can and fancy the chat, I wish we could. One day I have the aim to have a compost loop. And they're not, the sort of ones you go out to camping in the middle of nowhere, there's a big hole in the ground and it's like, oh my god, don't drop anything down there. They can be really snazzy and efficient and very clean, no odour. These are things that can work really well with modern homes, and they're worth considering. So that's zero water toilets, so composting loos. Next thing, shorter showers. Okay, I've got some ideas for you here. First of all, just do what I do and have a shower once a week, whether you need it or not. It might just be an English thing. We all shower a little bit too much. 4-minute showers are the recommended amount, and I dare you to time yourself. It's one song, so just choose one song and see if you can shower for that long. Alternatively, showering together if you're into that sort of thing. But, so showers make up 31% of our household's water use. I gave these workshops to students in the UK, and I can remember hearing some people say, young kids, teenagers, say 45 minutes they spent in the shower, and their parents would be going, get out, come on. They just don't understand the impact of that. So, and the poor parent has to pay the bill, which would be insane. And yes, God, I love being in water. Water is actually an analgesia. We're very, very connected to water. Humans and water, being made up of water. We came from water, if evolution. But still, there's a way to be economical with it. 45 minutes is a lot.
Have a bath if you want to be in there 45 minutes.
Have a 45-minute shower. Just have a bath. Absolutely, yeah. And shorter showers, fewer baths. Look, I am an environmentalist and I love baths. But a bath for me with some Epsom salts is a cleanser, it is a de-stressor. I gave birth in water. It is such an important thing and it's a lovely thing. Don't deny yourself of some really important health benefits, but let's all, just try and keep things a little bit sustainable. So a 4-minute shower, the average time is about 7.5 minutes, 7.1 minutes, but obviously some people shower a lot longer than that, and some maybe even less. But so you can save 27 litres of water per shower, about $280 per year on water. And remember, that's energy. So if you can actually save an enormous amount of kilowatt or carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere emissions, which is the equivalent, this is if you reduce your shower time, equivalent of a flight from Melbourne to Townsville. Look at that. So just by reducing your shower time to 4 minutes. Now there's other things as well. You can get very efficient shower heads or low flow restrictors that you can put onto your shower. These things were actually being rolled out. There was somebody knocked on our door and said, "Can we change your shower head?" And I said, "All right then." And it's been low flow and saving lots of money for us. But you can also tap into rebates and things, and often the water companies might give you these things as well. So these are all just really basic things that can actually make a difference because there's less water coming out when you're actually showering. An efficient 5-star rated shower head or shower is actually, it can save a 2-person household at least $160 a year on energy and water. That's pretty amazing actually. So that's the cost of one. But in many cases, as I say, these things are often subsidised or even given out for free. So keep an eye out before you have to run out and buy anything for it. But okay, so that concludes the bathroom. Next is outdoors. I just got to keep an eye on the time. I did have a little time because I do like to talk. Ellen knows that. I'm not anything but concise. So outdoors. Now I love gardening, don't we all? It's therapy for me. But outdoor water use accounts for 25 to 50% of our water use. And obviously it goes without saying that the more garden or the more land you have, the more water you're typically using, unless you do already have water tanks. So inefficient use of water is things like leaving sprinkler systems running, so that's coming from the mains, and unnecessary amounts of time and hosing down, leaving them on for unnecessary amounts of time, and especially when you leave things on in the heat of the day. You are watering for it to be evaporated. It is the most inefficient use of water. And also things like hosing down pathways instead of sweeping them. So there are actually permanent water saving rules here in Ballarat. You can dog your neighbours in if you see them doing it, if you want to, or you could just have a very lovely word with them. But we do have this fascination of people in the rich countries with our green lawns. Green lawns, yes, it's become a sort of status symbol. And the reality is that those lawns aren't feeding anybody, they're just making you feel good. It's really not necessary to water your lawns in the summer. Let them go brown, because as soon as it rains again, they'll go green again. Nothing kills grass, I'm telling you, that it'll come back. So leave your lawns. The permanent water saving rules, if you go to Central Highlands Water, these obviously do change and depends if there are droughts, etc. going on. But at the moment, the permanent rules, there's actually quite a few of them, and I've really condensed them down. So if you're using a handheld hose, it has to have a trigger nozzle and it has to be leak-free. Residential, commercial gardens and lawns can be watered using a hose, bucket, watering can at any time. If you're using a watering system though, it only can be used between 6 p.m. and 10 a.m. So if you do see someone with a sprinkler system and it looks like it's coming from their tap and it is during the day, they are breaking the permanent water saving rules. So they really you should think about having a gentle conversation with them if you know your neighbours well. Other things to consider if you are into gardening is native or drought-tolerant plants. There are native gardeners, landscape gardeners, who create gardens that require zero watering. It is possible, even in a really dry climate, to have a beautiful garden that does not need to be watered. And there are some really good tools, Smart Water Advice. If you go onto our website, Smart Water Advice Plant Finder, there are lots of listed plants there that can help with that. So with watering, first of all, plants prefer rainwater. They actually thrive better with rainwater compared with mains water because it's been treated. So always try and wait for it to rain, or use your harvested rainwater if you're collecting in a tank. They prefer it. They also do better when they are watered less often but for longer. So deep-rooted cleansing watering is actually going to make a much, much stronger plant and tree or crop. So mulching as well. So if you can use any type of mulch, whether you buy that from a landscape supplier, whether you're using straw, bark chip, or whether it's shredded paper, but any amount of mulch on top of the soil can actually reduce evaporation by 70%. And again, with when to water, there is no point watering in the heat of the day when it's really sunny. You scorch your plants, but also it just evaporates. So always do it early in the morning or late in the evening. Now, please tell me everybody is harvesting some water, some rainwater. These things, I mean, they should be mandatory. I think they almost could be in some new builds.
I think they are in new builds, yeah.
Because, and whether or not they're being used is another question though, because if people don't understand why or how to use them, that was always the problem in the UK, that people would have water butts, we call them, and they didn't know what they were, or they just said, oh, these look ugly. So you've got to have the incentive and the education to go with it, to know why you need it. So a rainwater tank is one of the greatest proven opportunities for residents to save water and costs at home. Ballarat residents could save up to 25% of their daily water needs if you connected it to a new or existing rainwater tank, if you connected it to your toilet, laundry, or even just your outdoor irrigation. So, and it's worth looking into connecting it to indoor as well, because these are things I think people probably don't see as a possibility or don't understand that can be done. So yeah, it's pretty amazing how important and how impactful rainwater harvesting is. This is a really interesting rainwater system that I found on the website. I'll give you the details of where I got it from, but basically you can connect a water tank to your house and supply your entire household, including drinking water. The guy, I'll just go to the next, his name is Dr. Peter J. Coombs. He's a very, very well-known scientist, and he leading scientist in water systems. He was part of the assessment of water, the water framework for Victoria, I think it was. But his system has been proved and tested, and basically, if you have a look further at this, it is possible to actually have a rainwater system, and you don't even need to clean the tank. So his theory is based, or his science is based on the fact that it's not cleaned. A lot of people think they have to clean their tank out every year, and it's really not necessary at all. So he was explaining how the bottom sludge and the microbiome that is created there through the bacteria is actually what cleans the water. So there is no need for it to go through a cleansing process. As long as you have really good filters on the gutters and as it's coming in to the actual tank, and no grey water is going in, that system there can actually feed your entire household, including drinking water. So, and there's a lot more to it. Obviously, you need to make sure that you haven't got lead-lined roof or anything like that. But I found that really fascinating, and I think that's the sort of thing that if you are really thinking about building resilience for the future, if you're living in a remote place that does not have a lot of or great access to water, this is where I would be thinking. This is a really huge integrated system, but really worth doing. Obviously not necessarily a cheap thing to do, because it's a holistic kind of your whole house, but it's definitely worth researching. I've put links in for that, and if anybody wants me to share those, I'll share them on the Smart Living group. So, yes, it's really fascinating, that stuff. So that's up there. I thought I would include that. But also grey water systems are another really interesting way, kind of similar. But this is actually taking the water that comes out of the house because it's been, it's dirty. So this would include your bathroom sink, your shower, your laundry sink, and your washing machine, and actually using it for outdoor use. So grey water is not drinkable because it's been contaminated, and in some cases you have to be very careful because you need to make sure you're using laundry detergents that are grey water safe. You would need to make sure you avoid certain chemicals and things like that. But this system can be as simple or as complex as it needs to be. I mean, I know people that have a hose from their washing machine that goes right out into the garden, and that's what they do in the summer just to keep a certain area of the garden nice and green. As long as it's not going into crops, you're not eating any of those things, that's okay. And then other grey water systems can actually go through filtered pumps and actually come through a cleansing process that way and then out into the garden. And in some really wonderful ways, you can actually just let nature do it. So people have created sort of garden systems and filter systems where it goes through gravel and goes through the roots of plants, and then it cleans it that way and comes back out into the garden. Green streets is another really interesting concept that really dry places around the world are starting to use. So Portland in America have introduced green streets, or bioswales, I think they're called, or rain gardens. So this is something on a community level you can think about doing, but I guess in a way even just your own nature strip, you could do a little version of that. But it's essentially collecting that runoff from the streets, because when the rain does come gushing down in the summer, and we will see a lot more flooding occur in urban environments because that water just has nowhere to go. So this really does help the city's sewer stormwater systems, and it also helps prevent pollution getting into rivers, which is a huge thing I haven't even got into, because river pollution is a big problem from cities. Other small things, why is it coming up like that? I know why it is. Yeah. So dishwashers, washing machines, make sure they are completely filled before you turn them on. Really simple things like that can save money and save water. Make sure you turn off your tap when washing hands, brushing your teeth, washing up, and instead put the plug in and fill the sink before when you're doing the dishes and things. But also, better still, you can use a bowl in your kitchen sink, do your dishes, and then throw the water out on the nature strip or something, just out on the garden. So all those things, motion sensors, they're a really good one. They've introduced at our school, the kids' local school, have introduced motion sensors because apparently it's fun to leave the tap running. That's another way of saving some money there. Okay, so running a tap without a flow controller can use more than 16 litres of water a minute. So turning off the tap when you brush your teeth can save 11,600 litres a year. It's actually amazing, isn't it? And so just some other really simple taps. You see that thing up there in the picture? That is actually a sort of filter that you put over your plug hole in your bath or in your kitchen sink. Now, it doesn't seem like a water-saving thing, but it's more about contamination getting through into the sewers. So food and oils and things, stopping them from going down into your plug hole can have a knock-on effect on the actual system itself, but also prevents blockages from occurring in your household. So those are about 50 cents. Oh, they're probably not, but they're probably very cheap in a Bunnings or something. And they, I shouldn't plug any particular store, any DIY store, but they are a really good thing, really cheap thing to just have. But things like, if you want to collect the water when you take a shower and it's not hot straight away, you can collect water in a bucket and use that. I mean, these are small things, but they all add up. If you have a swimming pool, I don't think you'd be in this, but you might be in a swimming pool or a spa, you look at tips for preventing evaporation. Only fill the kettle with as much water as you need to boil. Yes, I mean there's just lots and lots of different ways in the home, and there's more than what I've even talked about today. But I'm really passionate about this subject, and I could talk about it till the cows come home. I managed to condense it to an hour just, and I think I need a medal. This is a little poem I just made. I wrote. So the rivers began flowing, the ponds reappeared, the flowers and animals together all cheered. Because we saved water in every which way, together as one we kept the drought away. Thank you very much, everyone. Anyone have any questions?
If anyone online has any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I was just thinking, it's not a question, but when we give Cass a bath, we've got like the baby bath with the drain, and you fill it up and then drain it, and I always use it to water all the plants because we don't use any like shampoo or anything on him. He doesn't need it, and that's, I don't know, what would that be, 30 litres or so every time? Our house actually isn't connected to town water at all. Our property is not connected, so we have tank water only, and different system, grey water system, septic tank, that kind of thing. So I guess we have to be worried about it in a different way, that we do have finite storage. You got something to contribute, Cass?
He's got a question.
And if anyone's, I did mention this on my interview with Brett on 3BA yesterday, but he had me thinking about water collection, and if anyone's had a garden tour at John Ditchburn's property, he collects water off every single structure in his garden. Like he'll have a tiny little wood storage, or tool storage, and it's like, 1 metre by 2 metres, and he'll have it collecting into some sort of, so you don't even need the commercial water tanks necessarily. He's got water running into IBCs or buckets or, all sorts of kinds of things. So, there's just so many ways that you can do it.
Every gutter that you see on a house, if I don't see a water tank attached to it, I just think, what a waste.
Yeah.
Because that water is literally usable and it is going down the drain. You really need to be thinking about tanks. And even small, even if you're not on a huge property, or even if you're a renter, you can get little slimline water tanks that are sort of 200 litres, Or obviously you can get huge, giant tanks, but those sorts of small things, even if you're living even if you've only got a balcony as a garden, that's enough to sustain all your plants, in your indoor plants, for the entire time, ongoing. You wouldn't need to turn on the tap. And just remember I said your plants actually prefer rainwater. So,
I always, when I'm washing my face and taking my makeup off, because it takes ages for it to turn into hot water, I always fill up water bottles and then water all our indoor plants with it. And that's like a way to remind myself to water the indoor plants as well, because otherwise I forget.
I think when it's drummed into you, if you've got that sort of instinct and you're doing those things,
you just make it a habit, don't you?
And the more you do it, the more it does become a habit. But if we change the way we view water, that's probably the sort of hurdle, and not just think of it as being just always there.
Infinite.
Yeah.
Any other questions apart from you, Cass? Well, thank you so much, Grace. That was awesome. And if anyone online has any questions later, feel free to put them in the comments and we will answer them via the group. No session next month because it's Christmas. So have a good Christmas, everybody, and Happy New Year. And we will be back in February. Make sure that you're following the Smart Living Ballarat Facebook page for all the info for next year's program and the dates as well. Thank you. I think I've covered everything.